sitting now and digesting all of that and letting it build spiritual muscles and strength further inside of me. And I leave that with that memory. Not with the memory, my last moment. And what if a person dies right there? Allahu Akbar. Yes, he would die joyfully. The last thing I have done in this dunya is that thing. Versus what if he went to a mall after that, and after that dies, the last thing I have done in this dunya is I was in a mall. That's what is the last thing you have done. Now the last thing I have done in this dunya was the tawaf around the house of Allah with a heart missing it so profoundly and so sincerely. And then we go back home with that spirit. And it is so beautiful, that spirit, that the Sunnah teaches, and the Salaf of our Salaf radiallahu ta'ala anhum also practiced, that when the Hajj is coming back and you receive them, the first thing you do, you go and kiss them and ask them to pray for you right there before they do anything, because of that hal in which they are, still fresh, and Allah is still fresh in their hearts, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to ask them at that moment to ask Allah to forgive you. At that moment, especially. Now, it is a well-established practice. The ulama of old, rahimahumullah ta'ala, the ulama of old, it's an ijma' amongst them in all of the madhahib, the four madhahib. Al-Hanafi, Al-Maliki, Al-Shafi'i, Al-Hanbali, are the greatest ulama of those madhahib, the greatest muhaddithun and huffaz and fuqaha and usuliyun of those madhahib radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. All of them have practiced for always, and their sanad to the salaf radiyallahu ta'ala anhum and to the companions and so on is well established. That after that, as for example, Imam al-Nawawi says, speaking of this type of ijma', Imam al-Nawawi in the Shafi'i madhab says that, and the other ulama, and Imam, for example, Qadi Iyad rahimahullah ta'ala in the Maliki madhab, and before him Imam ibn Abd al-Barr in al-madhab al-Hanafi, the great Ibn al-Humam rahimahullah ta'ala, who summarizes all of that in the madhab of Abi Hanifa, and also relate about Abu Hanifa radiallahu ta'ala an statements, and each one they relate, each madhab relates from Shafi'i from Imam Shafi'i, Al-Hanafi from Imam Abu Hanifa, Maliki from Imam Malik, and Al-Imam and the Hanbali madhab, such as the great ulama of that madhab like Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala, Abu al-Faraj al-Maqdisi and al-Buhuti and so on and so forth rahimahullah ta'ala. They all unanimously say that after Hajj it is highly mustahab. It is highly mustahab. Some imam have say it is highly mustahab, that it is almost like a wajib to go visit the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To go visit the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Medina. And to have the niyyah of traveling for that purpose, even if that purpose alone. And with also the purpose of performing salah in al-Masjid al-Nabawi. That is, you can also have the niyyah only for visiting the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It is only, and this is all of the ulama rahimahullah ta'ala of old, all of them, we do not know in any report of any text that any one of them said otherwise, that you cannot do that. None of them, except when Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala in the 7th century Hijri, he rahimahullah ta'ala has opined, unlike all of the ulama of his time and before his time, he has opined, rahimahullah ta'ala, and in accordance to all of those ulama, he, rahimahullah ta'ala, was wrong on this issue. And since then, he has had followers who practiced on the basis of this opinion, namely, that it is ma'asiyah. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, wa ghafarallahu lah, may Allah forgive him and grant him rahmah. He said, it is ma'asiyah, it is even disobedience to have a special travel and journey to visit the qabr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this, the ulama have said of his time, even his students, some of his students, Imam al-Mizzi, Imam al-Dhahabi, Ibn Kathir, and so on, most of them, and the ulama of all of the other madhahib have, rahimahullah ta'ala, responded to him and have shown that this is awful. This is an awful statement. من أشنع ما قاله رحمه الله تعالى وغفر الله تعالى له, as a scholar who is loving of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and who is very intelligent as well. But لكل جواد كبوة, every pure-blooded horse also fumbles, and this is the most major fumble. I say this now, I did not used to say it before. This is the most major fumble of Al-Imam rahimahullah ta'ala, Ibn Taymiyyah. And therefore, all of the ulama of before and after, most of them, except those who followed his opinion, rahimahullah ta'ala, all have said that and have practiced that. Ulama greater than Ibn Taymiyyah, like Ibn Taymiyyah, or less than Ibn Taymiyyah, of all ages, have asserted that and have practiced that. It suffices that in his own madhab, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the Hanbali madhab, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, and the greatest students of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, such as Al-Buhuti rahimahullah ta'ala, and many others, and Al-Marwazi and others, have practiced ziyarah of the qabr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even especially, and have had special trips just for that. And there are many texts from the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that are either authentic or hasan or da'if, and together, even if they're all da'if, listen to this, even if all the texts are da'if, together, because they come from many different chains of narrations, they comprise in what is well established in the usul of hadith, that they will comprise the argument that those texts together become reliable, become at least hasan. Even if we say that they are all weak. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala has argued that they are all weak, nay, even he said they are spurious, mawdu'. And that statement, every scholar of hadith afterwards, of the great ulama, rahimahullah ta'ala, have opined and shown that he was absolutely wrong on this. Myself, I have looked in those texts and what the ulama have said about all of those texts, and indeed the ulama of all the before him and the ulama of his time and after him who argued otherwise are definitely right, rahimahullah ta'ala. Of those texts is man zara qabri wajabat lahu shafa'ati. This text is in every, and many other texts, in every fiqh text of all of the madhab, even the madhab of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, the madhab al-Hanbali, is the greatest proponents and the greatest communicators of that madhab, such as Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi and Abu al-Faraj al-Maqdisi and al-Buhuti and wa ghayruhum rahimahullah ta'ala. They all use these texts as evidence for that. Man zara qabri wajabat lahu shafa'ati. He who or she who or they who visit my grave, my intercession shall be a right for them. Amen. And there are many other texts, many other texts. Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, for example, the great encyclopedic hafiz and critique of hadith. I don't know how much you know of usul al-hadith. Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, if you know Al-Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he's called by the scholars Amirul Mu'mineen fi al-Hadith. Is the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the prince of the believers in hadith. He said about Imam al-Dhahabi, who was before him, he counted Imam al-Dhahabi, I think, of the only ones of the latter ulama who was an alim of hadith, who has the ability to collect all hadith and to have knowledge of them that is statistical. You know, that is statistical. He has the hadith and he has a statistical knowledge of his, with his hifz, with memorization of the hadith. That he can gather them and pull them and collect them and remembers where each one is and connects them together. And Ibn Hajar was himself an ayah min ayatillah fi hifz al-hadith and in fiqh, and he was qadi, super qadi of Misr and so on. He called al-Dhahabi that one. Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, who was of the students of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, disagrees with Ibn Taymiyyah. And he said the hadith, in all honesty and truth, even if some of them or many of them have lean, he said lean, that is slight weakness, together they are authoritative. Together they are authoritative. And he himself, rahimahullah ta'ala, is of the opinion that the ziyarah of the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is a matter that existed always and was practiced always by the Salaf radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum, and by all of this ummah, and even after Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and after a while that opinion disappeared. After 100 and some years it disappeared. But then lately, about a century and a half ago, this was brought back into prominence. Since about a century to a century and a half ago, by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, ghafarallahu lahu rahimahullah ta'ala, he brought it up and resuscitated it and was influenced by that opinion, and he worked to disseminate it, and that's why we see sometimes that opinion disseminating in the absence of disseminating the other opinions of the 99.9% of the ulama of old, and of brightness intellectually, and of beautiful spiritual transparency, which is, at least if it is another opinion, yet it is the opinion of the overwhelming, not majority, but landsliding majority of the ulama on this issue. And that's why that is usually done so. And if you read in a book that, for example, the ahadith pertaining to the ziyarah of the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are all spurious, that's exactly repeating the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, who indeed said that, but he himself actually in other places says otherwise. And that opinion is found to be, that statement is found to be upon analysis, hadithi analysis, exaggeration, and an overwhelming exaggeration, that it is not correct. That if at all they are weak, many of them are weak, but it is well established in hadith that texts that are weak together, if they come from different turuq, chains of narrations, then that text becomes authentic, meaning authentic, that is reliable and trustworthy and an authority in ahkam. And there is another argument and many other arguments which are not the point here. The point is so that, alhamdulillah, one should feel very comfortable and very happy to go visit Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he is buried, and to have that intention. You should be feeling very comfortable from the scholarly point of view, knowing what I told you, and I told you in brief. You should be very, very comfortable doing that. You are doing simply what your Salaf have done, what the greatest ulama of this ummah have done. And I told you, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, in the 7th century Hijri, he died around 7th and 8th century Hijri. He died in the year 728 Hijri, and we're in the year 14 what? 1436 or 37 we are. This is the year. And he died in 728 rahimahullah ta'ala in that year, and he's of the opinion that is otherwise. And that's an opinion. But if even you read him very carefully, I find his opposition, I would call it a soft one, not as harsh and as hard as some people depict it. I would call it a soft opposition, because first of all, he rahimahullah ta'ala says, paying visit to the qabr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is one of the greatest qurubat. He says that one of the greatest means to draw nearer to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's for sure, he says. And some people say that he's against it. That's untrue. As a matter of fact, he rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that explicitly. But the strange thing that happens is that with that he says, however, that you from India or from North Africa, from America or from Mecca or from wherever, you specially travel for that and that only, he says that is bid'ah, that is ma'siyah. And that is the problem. Because in usul al-fiqh it is well established that if something is obligatory, the means for it becomes obligatory. If something is mustahab, the means for it becomes mustahab. That's the most logical of things. And in fiqh. So if, and he knows rahimahullah ta'ala, if performing ziyarah to the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is mustahab, and I live in Africa, or I live in Mecca, or I live in Riyadh, then going to it, traveling to it becomes mustahab. That's logical. Of course, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, no, you have to associate another niyyah with it. You have to say, I'm going to go to pray in the Masjid al-Nabawi, and then visit him. Fine, alhamdulillah, we can do that. But that doesn't mean that if you have your niyyah to visit the qabr only is wrong. On the contrary, the evidence is that most, if not all of those who have done it of before, they went for that purpose. So this means that if I want to go to Medina for business, my niyyah is to go to business, I have that niyyah, and then I go visit the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's acceptable. But if my niyyah is to go visit the grave and not business, that's not acceptable. So these are of the logical inconsistencies in that opinion of that scholar, rahimahullah ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his soul. Remember, when scholars make mistakes, it doesn't mean they are like us. Their mistakes are mistakes of scholars, because also of the great things that Allah Azza wa Jal has allowed to come through them of khair, that will be a shafa'ah for them. The good they have done for this ummah, the knowledge they have spread, and they have practiced, inshallah ta'ala, Allah will make that, will forgive that, and Allah forgives criminals who have killed and murdered. A alim who makes a mistake, even serious mistake, Allah is akram subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah, and I don't know, I feel like saying this also here. One of the considered by his people, alhamdulillah, this man who lived in one of the Muslim countries, a righteous man with alhamdulillah a lot of students, and an elderly person practicing, a man of alhamdulillah, of tazkiyah and of tasawwuf in the right sense. Subhanallah, one of his main students told me, and I never talked to him about anything about this issue. We just were talking about other things. And then he mentioned this. And I never expressed any opinion on any of these issues. pertaining to Ibn Taymiyyah or anybody else as we were there. And he says to me that our Shaykh, rahimahullah ta'ala, passed away a few years ago. He had a dream once. In a dream, he saw Ibn Taymiyyah in Jannah. He saw Ibn Taymiyyah in Jannah. And in the Jannah, on one side, there were scrubs, bushes that are thorny. Subhanallah. And I said, Allahu Akbar. Allah. And I didn't tell him anything what was in my mind or in my heart or anything. He said the interpretation of that is Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala is alim Rabbani, who is of Jannah, but those thorny bushes are his out of the ordinary fatawi. Like this one, most discussed by the ulama. There are two things that are most discussed by the ulama that are absolutely very abnormal about this one, and also at-tawassul bin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's fulfillment of the prayer by pleading to Allah through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is also his opinion, rahimahullah ta'ala, not like anyone before him. Also, this is another opinion, rahimahullah ta'ala, and he meant well. He meant only in the best of his knowledge to preserve, to the best of his knowledge at that time, Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. But Allah teaches us that always, when it comes to ilm, never rely on one alim. If you do, that's risky, even however great they may be in your eyes. Especially nowadays, diversify your sources of knowledge. Diversify the sources of knowledge. Always. And if there are differences amongst the ulama, run to the fact that if those ulama are mujtahidun, run to the fact that the larger number of them, because there are mu'minun, muwahhidun, ulama, logically and spiritually, chances are that the more are more right than the less. Keep that in mind always. So, ziyarah qabr al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, having said this briefly, is very, very mustahab, very, very recommended. And maybe one day or some other days we will speak about the virtues of that and what we have of wonderful, authentic narrations and others from our Salaf, from the companions' time themselves, and from the Tabi'i time, and the ulama of old, man and women, all about the ziyarah of the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the tawassul bin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when we are there. So of that which is in all four madhahib's major works of fiqh, Imam Ahmad, for example, in al-madhab al-Hanbali, and Imam Ahmad is well known as Imam Ahli Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And he himself, radiyallahu ta'ala wa rahimahullah ta'ala, in very explicit words, he practiced and he taught التوسل بالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عند قبره. That part of the etiquettes of dua, when we go visit Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم and we stand there in dua, we implore Allah by Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. And this type of tawassul is mentioned almost, I think not almost, I'm almost just conservatively, in all of the major works of the madhahib al-arba'a, and those ulama who reported those are mujtahidun, most of them, huffaz, fuqaha, usuliyun, abidun, zahidun, rahimahumullah ta'ala, who have an encyclopedic and a statistical, many of them, knowledge of the fiqh of this ummah and the opinions of the different ulama and the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Having said that, I'm going to stop here for a moment and spend something like 10 minutes answering some of your questions before we come back after that, and we talk about some of the external aspects of the fiqh of Hajj. Yes, please. Any preference between? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I think it's a good question. The question is there any preference to go visit the qabr of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam before Hajj or after Hajj? Some say that, some say that. I think in this case should be left to your qalb. Why are you doing it before? Why are you doing it after? Many of the ulama, as I have mentioned to you, like Imam al-Nawawi and many before him and after him, Imam al-Nawawi was before Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Abd al-Barr was before Taymiyyah, Al-Qadi Iyad was before Ibn Taymiyyah, all of these, Imam Ahmad of course is before Ibn Taymiyyah, all of these, it seems, and in those Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, the reporters of the Hanbali fiqh, that even Ibn Taymiyyah says, rahimahullah ta'ala, and his student Ibn Qayyim, no one greater in the fiqh of Ibn Hanbal, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, came to Sham greater than Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah ta'ala. So these are the ulama of before them who have always, alhamdulillah, highly recommended that visitation, and many of them said afterwards. Yustahabbu afterwards. Because the Hajj is fard. Ziyarah is mustahab, and to some ulama very strongly mustahab. In some Hanafi opinions and in some Maliki opinions it is wajib. Some ulama of the Hanafi madhab, some ulama of the Maliki madhab, they opine it is wajib in one's lifetime as well, inshallah ta'ala. But the prevailing opinion of the ulama is that it is highly mustahab. So that one of the ulama in the Maliki madhab is so highly mustahab that it is like wajib, almost like wajib. Aina. Any other question? Yes. Yes. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi. That's a long discussion and it requires proof, and I usually dislike to speak and give answers without at least mentioning some of the evidence, so that because there are other opinions obviously, and just to say I heard it from someone is not enough. I heard it from someone because A, B, C, D, and I can tell you this, that also in accordance to the majority of the ulama of old and of before and of after, in accordance to the majority of the ulama, it is also jaiz and even sometimes mustahab. And there are those who say it is not mustahab, but they don't say it is not jaiz. And some ulama said we do not have any report explicit that says from the early ones, from the mutaqaddimun, from the salaf, that says you cannot do that. On the contrary, we do have reports, practical reports of those who have done that, of the salaf radiallahu ta'ala anhum wa ardahum. We do have those reports indeed, as to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for sure, and we have reports for sure, the likes of the great Ibn Hibban, Ibn Khuzaymah. Do you know Ibn Hibban? Do you know Ibn Hibban well? Ibn Hibban al-Busti, the one of Sahih Ibn Hibban, the great scholar, Hafidun, Muhaddithun, Faqihun, Qadi, min ayatillah. He, Ibn Khuzaymah, and his famous Sahih Ibn Khuzaymah. For example, just to mention a few, these people used to go to those places of the Salihun specifically, and to plead to Allah Azza wa Jal in that space to grant their wishes. And this is reported even by the likes of Imam al-Dhahabi, the student of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, Muhammad ibn al-Munkadir, the great tabi'i radiallahu ta'ala anhu, has done things that. وهلم جرة. And the reports of the Salaf practice is well established as well. This is very brief in answering that. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Oh, see, alhamdulillah. So, khalas, since you mentioned it, I promise that if you remember it and you remind me of it, I will do that. And I did forget yesterday completely. If I forget, it means that nobody mentions it. It simply means, in retrospect, that Allah didn't want me to share it. Now, if you reminded me, this means that Allah wanted me to share it, inshaAllah ta'ala. Yes, remember the story yesterday of Sayyidina Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, who was in that open space of Al-Masjid al-Haram, and he saw, Allah made him see this vision of those two angels, subhanAllah, descending from heavens. And one of them says to the other, how many Hajjaj there will be this year? And he said, how many? 600,000. And then he asks him, how many are destined to have Hajj Mabrur? He answered, how many? 6. And he said, what? And I woke up, mad'ura, frightened. Oh my God, I will never be one of those 6. And who he was, I told you who he was, Sayyidina Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, rahimahullah ta'ala. The likes of Abu Sulaiman al-Darani are celebrated by even the likes of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah mentions Abu Sulaiman al-Darani with love and reverence. He mentions Ahmad al-Hawari with love and reverence. He mentions Ma'ruf al-Karhi with love and reverence. He mentions especially Sayyid Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah loves Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, just in case some of you don't know that. He loves Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. In his opinion, of those who came later than these early Salaf, he's perhaps of the greatest people of Tasawwuf. And he loves him. When he mentions his name, he often says, قَدَّسَ اللَّهُ رُوحَهُ. Just like that in Majmu' al-Fatawi, in the volumes 10 and 11 of the old edition. When he mentions Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, Ibn Taymiyyah says, قَدَّسَ اللَّهُ رُوحَهُ. May Allah sanctify his soul. قَدَّسَ اللَّهُ سِرَّهُ. Anyways, these people are celebrated by our ulama, and most of them fed as their students, and there is no exception with Imam Ibn Taymiyyah either. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah has opinions on his own on certain issues, in certain specific issues. It does not mean that he rejects everything, and that's very wrong. Those who say about Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala that he was against tasawwuf, that's absolutely untrue. I have come to that conclusion, that he has strange opinions on some issues, not well accepted. That's one issue. But that he, as some say, he's the anti-tasawwuf, that's absolutely untrue. And this is some of the evidence I mentioned to you, and there is a lot more than that of evidence. So just to review an entire 2 volumes. Each one is about 600 pages. In his Majmu' al-Fatawi, in the old edition, volumes 10 and 11, and read them. They're very, very useful and very, very beneficial about tasawwuf itself, and how he, rahimahullah ta'ala, absolutely argues all the arguments at his level, in his knowledge, for tasawwuf, not against tasawwuf, but he also argues against some people of tasawwuf that in his opinion have done some things wrong and have said some things wrong and have taught some things wrong. That's still in his opinion, rahimahullah ta'ala. So Sayyiduna Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, this alim, this wali, min awliya'illahi ta'ala, he saw that, and then he was frightened. Chances, what are the chances that I am one of those 6? He says, none. Look how they looked at themselves. Every wali of awliya'ullah ta'ala for surely always thinks of himself or herself. Not they think out of humility. No, they really believe they are nothing with respect except if Allah somehow, yulhimuhum, and that exists sometimes, that you are special. And that exists, but that's not the general rule. The general rule is they don't know that. And then he said, when he went to Muzdalifah, and he was in Muzdalifah, and prayed in Muzdalifah, reflected in Muzdalifah, and was in dua and in dhikr, that night, under that open sky of Muzdalifah, those 13 centuries ago, he saw another vision. Those two same angels descending from heavens. SubhanAllah, as Allah wanted to give him the karama of this knowledge. He says to the other, the one who says 6, when he said 6, and then he says to him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His merciful grace, and this I'm paraphrasing the meaning of that text as it was related, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His merciful grace, He released by the barakah of each one of those 6, to each one of those 6, He granted as a gift 100,000 Hajj. Karamullah. Allah is infinite in His karam. Some of us, some of those of us who are too, we think rational, or those of us who think we have to rely on our deeds only. يحجرون نعمة الله ورحمة الله على أنفسهم وعلى غيرهم. Those of us like that, we constrict the rahmah of Allah to be limited, because we are limited and we think this is too much. For each one that year, ikraman, ennobling that wali, he gave, he freed, he liberated, he forgave 100,000. It means that year all of them were forgiven by the merciful love and grace of Allah expressed through His ikram of His wali, of His abd. Ikraman. Ikraman. That wali, it's not his prerogative. That wali prays. That wali turns to Allah Azza wa Jal. That wali asks Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah would give him as Allah wants to give. And some of what He gives to His awliya is beyond what you can ever imagine. And this is مجمع عليه عند العلماء أيضا فيما أعلم. This is a matter of consensus amongst the ulama, that when Allah gives a wali of His awliya, He may give him that which you cannot imagine of gifts. Gifts, the word gifts is unbounded and unlimited in terms of the jar, the quality, the what, in terms of the quantity, that's limited because Allah is infinite. But limited in what sense? I remember that Bedouin, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, showed him kindness, and the one who urinated in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some companions were so angry they wanted to beat him up or maybe even kill him, and then he stopped them and was very gentle and kind to him, and he taught him the proper way. And then the Bedouin was so elated and happy with this beautiful person, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, Allahumma arhamni wa Muhammada wa la tarham ma'ana ahada. He said, Ya Allah, grant me and Muhammad alone your rahmah, and no one else. That Bedouin. Then Rasulullah said, teaching us and teaching him, Ya hada laqad tahajjarta wasi'a. You should not do that. You have constricted and restricted the one who is wasi', very, very generous, very giving, very expansive, with A-N. Allah can give in ways you do not imagine. And those of us who are limited spiritually, who are limited in our knowledge, dimensions of this deen. We're limited in our experiences of this dimension in our deen. If we are limited, we don't see what we have never experienced. So if we're limited this way, well, we see that we can expand this way maybe, and not more. But if we're limited this way, it's already, then we can see it's this way. If we're limited this way, you see what I mean? Depending on our own spiritual limitations. Like in rational limitations, if somebody's logical capacity is limited, they will not understand certain logical issues and problems and solutions in math or in physics or in chemistry or even in other social sciences rather than exact sciences. It's going to be limited. And the more your rational scope is wider, the more you understand and you accept wider horizons of possibilities. Isn't it logical? And so it is with the spiritual realm. وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي فَضْلَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. And Allah gives of His fadl to whom He pleases, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any other question? And then yes. I'm sorry? Alhamdulillah, let's leave it till the end now, because that's how we'll have almost an hour of your questions to all sorts of questions. Nowadays, at this moment, I think we should, if I started that, it will take some time. But briefly said, as I was saying yesterday, whether in Mecca or in Medina, lose your nafs. Lose your nafs. Don't think of your rights. Don't think of your comfort. Don't think of your rights. Don't think of your comfort. Give, and forgive, and keep quiet all the time except in the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal. All the time. And feel the reverence of the space where you are. Medina, Allahu Akbar. Of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he is buried. It is said, Imam Malik, I told you don't start me. Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Malik, at one point of his life, then, that means perhaps when the spiritual awareness even grew further, he decided never to ride on the back of an animal in Medina. He decided never to ride on the back of any horse or mule or donkey or camel. Why? He said, I do not feel comfortable to ride and walk with the hoofs of an animal on the ground touched by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his feet, and on a ground where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is buried. I think this says it all. What attitude I should have. Many of our salaf, of our predecessors, when they go to Medina, they're riding, many of them, not all, many of them, they stop at the outskirts of Medina. They're riding. Once they arrive at the outskirts of the haram of the Medina, because it's also haram, they get off and they start walking. They do not ride because of the likes of the things that Imam Malik said and the likes of what they know of the reverence of the Sahaba for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There, in their turn, that's what they felt very strongly about as a show of reverence and adab with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And those who have done that of our salaf, some of them are great ulama and many beautiful awliya have done that, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and they continue in that condition of humility and more until they leave. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله. Yes. Okay. Yes. Rely on Allah completely. Before you leave, remember, before we leave, we take care of our family, we leave them, alhamdulillah, what they need, what the requirements, the provisions, inshallah ta'ala. We would plan, bi'idhnillah, all of that. And then, along with that, we rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once we begin to leave, really leave everything and everyone from our qulub. Remember, it is in that context that we mentioned Ibrahim alayhi salam and his son. And not only leaving his son, he was ordered to do what? And we explained what that meant at the level of detaching our qulub from everything, even beloved. Because now it's about connecting our qulub to Allah Azza wa Jal. And if we do that, and if we are sincere with that, rest assured, Allah will take care of it. To the degree we are afraid for a creation, we will be made to suffer on that account. To the degree we are afraid from or for, with lack of awareness of Allah Azza wa Jal, we shall maybe be tried. But if I fully commit to Allah Azza wa Jal, and how can I? If you're lost, you're lost in your qalb. You don't choose to think about them or not think about them. When that comes natural, when the shuhud is there, you just don't. You didn't even plan not to. It just happens. If your qalb connects, khalas, everything else disconnects. With a sense also of serenity and a sense of comfort. Serenity and comfort. By the way, if you decide to call them by phone or so, alhamdulillah, you may do that. But as long as your qalb is with Allah Azza wa Jal, and you're relying on Allah to preserve them and protect them, and so on. Allah Ta'ala. Let us begin, inshallah ta'ala, and briefly now, on the outward dimension of the fiqh of Hajj. And that means about the process of Hajj itself, because about the value of Hajj and the virtue of Hajj, we have already mentioned what is enough, inshallah ta'ala. In the fiqh sense, Hajj is fard. It is fardu ayn, an obligation on every Muslim. Once, of course, the Muslim attains the age of responsibility, therefore of discernment, puberty and discernment. And, of course, the other conditions are satisfied and requirements are satisfied, health and ability to travel and finances and all of that, inshallah ta'ala. And with women, when it comes to women, some ulama require, even for a person who is performing Hajj, they require a mahram. And if there is no mahram, then Hajj is not obligatory on that woman. Other ulama say, no, alhamdulillah, if we are in times of security and peace and safety and so on, and the woman travels in the company of righteous man, group of righteous man, or even some say group of women and righteous women together, and that safety is most probable, then they may do so, and even it is also obligatory on them to do so. Most people nowadays perform which type of Hajj? Hajj al-Tamattu'. Is there anyone here who is going to perform Hajj, who is going to perform other than Hajj Tamattu'? Please raise your hand. So there is no one. And therefore we're going to focus on Hajj Tamattu'. And the rest is also basically the same thing with certain differences. Because there are three types of Hajj, as you know: Hajj al-Ifrad, Hajj al-Qiran, and Hajj al-Tamattu'. Al-Ifrad is Hajj alone. Hajj alone. And in Ifrad, we are required to give the offering, the sacrifice. Hajj al-Qiran, it's both Umrah and Hajj together in the same trip without breaking Ihram after Umrah. And for that also, sacrifice is required as well. That's simple. Tamattu' is both Umrah and Hajj in the same year, and in the months, some say also in the months of Hajj, of course, we perform Umrah and Hajj while we break between the Umrah and the Hajj. That is, we finish the Umrah, we go with the niyyah of both Umrah and Hajj, tamattu'an. We perform Umrah first, and we release ourselves from Ihram until the day of Hajj begins, and we re-enter into a state of Ihram, and we perform Hajj, and we finish. And for Hajj al-Tamattu' there is no sacrifice required. I'm sorry, astaghfirullah. For Hajj al-Tamattu' there is sacrifice. What did I say before? What did I say about Ifrad? It's required. What did I say about Qiran? What did I say about Ifrad? I said Ifrad is required? No, astaghfirullah. Ifrad is not required. There is no sacrifice for Ifrad. Alhamdulillah that I thought I said something wrong. See, diversify your sources of knowledge, because people can even make mistakes unintentionally and they go unrectified. And person dies like that, and people think that's his opinion. And it was never his opinion, or he changed it later. SubhanAllah, and that happens in the realm of ilm, in the realm of scholarship. No, for Ifrad, there is no requirement for sacrifice. You may, tabarru'an, but it is not required. For Qiran, it is required, and for Tamattu' it is required. Aina. First of all, Umrah. Again, we're going to go a little swifter, because we have mentioned the essence and the essentials when we're speaking of inner dimensions of Hajj. We spoke of what is necessary and important. So we begin with Ihram, and I'm not going to go back to where we started, because that will take a long time, and we started there with the niyyah and what it meant and our attitudes. All of that is much more important than this other important things. So we begin with Ihram, and we mentioned how that should be. And it is sunnah after Ihram to perform 2 rakat in accordance with the Jumhur, the majority of the ulama. I repeat, in accordance with the majority of the ulama. You perform ghusl preferably, as we said before that, or at least wudu, but ghusl before that. And you wear your ihram clothes. And where all this should happen? At the miqat. May you wear your ihram clothes before the miqat? The answer is yes. May you enter into ihram before the miqat? I am of the opinion that you should not do that, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it at the miqat. And Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala was very strong against doing that before the miqat, because he said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that way. And if you do it before the miqat thinking this is better, then you have committed a bid'ah. Thinking this is better, it's extra reward. Please don't do that if you think of extra reward. But if for some other reasons, I don't know what, you did that, maybe you can say it's all right. But if you do that with the niyyah that this is good and better, then please don't do that. So wearing the ihram clothes does not mean you are in ihram, because we said the state of ihram is in your qalb. You enter into that state through your niyyah. Remember that. And then part of the fiqh is when we enter into ihram, as we enter into that hal, we say لبيك اللهم عمرة أو لبيك اللهم حجة عمرة متمتعا بها إلى الحج. لبيك اللهم عمرة متمتعا بها إلى الحج. Or you can say in any way you want. لبيك اللهم حج تمتع. If you say that, that's acceptable. The meaning is right. If you say even your niyyah is hajj tamattu', but this is talbiyah for the umrah of that hajj in your heart, and you say labbaik Allahumma umrah only, but your niyyah is the umrah of the hajj of tamattu'. That's also valid. And then you begin لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك. And don't forget what we said before. That's all more important than these important things. The spirit in which all of this is done. I will not repeat it. That's why I did one and then two. Inshallah ta'ala. Please remember that. And we stay in that hal that we talked about yesterday. And you stay in that hal, you're going to go through the security, you're going to go through the visa sections, you're going to go through all of that. Be in this mind, regardless of what others are doing, of your colleagues, of your other hujjaj, of those who accompanied you in the same plane, and there will be hundreds of people. Be in that hal. Lose yourself. Be kind to everybody. See goodness in everybody except in yourself. See goodness in everybody except in yourself. Don't trust yourself. Always judge yourself as meek and weak and irregular, and I have to be careful against my nafs. This is Hajj, is about losing my nafs and discovering my qalb. Be kind. Again, don't be demanding. Don't ask questions. Don't argue. Don't. فمن حج أو اعتمر, I'm sorry. فمن فرض فيهن الحج فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. We should avoid anything that distracts us. Any words, any arguments, any even conversations that are outside of the realm of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Complaining, kada, nothing. Keep in mind the spirit of what we mentioned yesterday. If you do that, you will not regret it. If you strive from the beginning to do that, wherever you are, in the plane, in the bus, on the road, outside, in the hotel, in your room, alone with people, in adversity and prosperity, keep the spirit of La لبيك لا شريك لك. And that's why you have to keep doing that. If you want to discover in your qalb some of those special benefits that Allah has in store for you, inshallah ta'ala. We continue that day and night in bus or wherever we are, إلى ذلك, until we come to enter the haram. Again, told you a few things already. Entering the haram and what it feels like. This is entering the haram. It's not Mecca yet. I mean the haram. The boundaries of the haram. If you're driving, they say here begins the haram. Oh my God. Especially for the first time in your life. If that does not humble you or bring you to your knees in your qalb, then what does? For the first time in your life. This space to which you have faced already in salah. The space of Rasulullah, the space of Ibrahim,